Today, we're talking about designing your AmeriCorps program. So if you were with us last week, we did AmeriCorps 101. So we talked a little bit about kind of what is AmeriCorps and all the different ways that you can partner with AmeriCorps or have an AmeriCorps program, as folks say. And so I will make sure that when we send out the follow-up from this week, that you guys get the link for the recording and the slides from last week as well, because that'll kind of help if you're sort of wondering, well, I don't even know what AmeriCorps is, and you're talking about program design. So that will answer all of those questions. But then today, we're really going to focus on how do you start bringing AmeriCorps to your community, right? How do we start making AmeriCorps something that you have at your organization? So I will kind of give the caveat first off that if you're watching that AmeriCorps 101 session and AmeriCorps NCCC or AmeriCorps Vista sounds like the right fit for you, we are here to support and happy to help. But your best contacts are actually going to be our regional contacts, Laura Grady and Stephanie Chan, and we're happy to make warm introductions. I know sometimes it can be hard to get in touch with folks, and so if you would like to go down NCCC or Vista as kind of your next AmeriCorps step, let us know, and we'd be happy to both connect you with those folks, and then also, because it's not a grant that we run through our office, we can be a little more helpful as far as helping you develop your concept paper or questions that you might have about the application. We're not the technical wizards in these two programs, but we can help provide you, data or resources for applying or program models, different things like that. So all that to say, if you're interested in NCCC or Vista, the process for that is developing a concept paper, and then you respond with a full application once your concept paper has been accepted, and we're happy to help support you through that process if that's your next step. Today, we're going to talk mostly about AmeriCorps State or AmeriCorps State National, as you'll hear it talked about. Samantha described this last week, but it's where organizations design a program that uses members in direct service to tackle community needs, and is more of a funding relationship than Vista or NCCC. So with Vista or NCCC, you're focusing a little bit more on having members come serve at your site. And so, for example, with Vista, you don't pay your Vista member directly, you pay a cost share that then AmeriCorps pays your Vista with. And so there's a little bit of a difference there between NCCC and Vista, where there's more of a funding relationship between your organization and AmeriCorps, the agency, versus AmeriCorps State, which is really thinking, okay, how do we bring members to your community program? You apply for funding to then support the members in their activities. We can get a little bit more into that. We can go through the focus areas. I think Sam might have mentioned this last time, but it's disaster recovery and relief and prevention, kind of thinking about how to get your community prepared for a disaster, education, healthy futures, economic opportunity, environmental stewardship, and working with veterans and military families. So you'll see that these are pretty broad focus areas. And so there's a lot that we can do in each kind of area to help support communities. And so if you have any questions about the specifics of kind of the different program models or the focus areas, let us know. Today, we're really going to be focusing on, okay, I know AmeriCorps State is my next option. I'm excited to start thinking about pulling pieces together so that I can actually have an AmeriCorps program at my organization. We're going to think about kind of what do you need to get started? How do you start crafting that required logic model? And then what do you need to show to kind of make people agree or believe in your solution as a way to start tackling your community need? So first off, the kind of core components of an AmeriCorps program design. The mission of AmeriCorps is really to use AmeriCorps funding and resources to engage community members as AmeriCorps members to tackle critical community needs. So when we start thinking about the critical elements or components of your program design, we're going to want to think about how you are articulating community needs. So how are you telling folks that this need matters? How are you using members, right, as part of the solution? And then thinking specifically about how your program is going to operate and create a change in your community. And we'll kind of dig into what these all look like. But these are sort of the building blocks that make up your AmeriCorps program design and then resultingly your AmeriCorps application or application for your AmeriCorps program. There we go. I went to slide too far. So when we think about kind of that community need, I know a lot of folks looking at just glancing at who's introduced themselves in the chat already, you guys have submitted a grant application, right, at some point in your life. And so you've had to put together a community need. When we're thinking about a community need from an AmeriCorps perspective, remember, we're thinking about tackling that community level, like prevalent challenge, right? And so we're looking for things. We're looking for organizations and communities that have a kind of semi-well-defined community need, right? Semi to well-defined. We want to know how you know the need exists. So we're looking at kind of like what data, statistics, conditions, et cetera, show to you that there's a need here. And then also keeping in mind that oftentimes when we're talking about our AmeriCorps program, we're not talking to folks within our focus, our content area. And so it's helpful to talk about the need as if you're talking to somebody who has little to no familiarity with your community or with the exact need that you're trying to work within. We also want to know kind of what needs to happen, right? Or what's your specific approach to meeting or overcoming this need. The example I use here a lot is around education because I think it's really tangible, right? And so when we think about education, there's a lot of different ways to approach education needs, right? There's a lot of data that can show us education needs exist. But then when we start thinking about how we actually know that this need is occurring and thinking about addressing this need, there's a lot of different ways that we can go about it. Let's begin. And so it's helpful here to be thinking through, are you coming at it from a teacher preparation perspective and thinking about the education system? Are you coming at it from a student perspective and thinking about student services? So this is really where you kind of get to hone down your community need from this is a giant need to this is kind of specifically how I anticipate going about addressing the community need. And then kind of thinking about what's that after effect, right? I think oftentimes we get so focused in on why a program is needed and what the program is going to do that we don't always consider what that impact is. And so I always encourage folks when we're thinking about our AmeriCorps program design to think about what our community looks like, kind of if this is all successful. So kind of painting that picture. I have here an example that I'll kind of use throughout the presentation to kind of harken back to, where I've kind of described the need, right, that local children aren't reading at grade level. It's specific enough that it tells me kind of what my scope is. So I'm not just saying kids are struggling in school, but it's not necessarily so specific that I, have cornered myself into one solution yet. And then here you'll see that I have painted an impact, right? So thinking about if students, are benefiting from additional enrichment activities, and if they are being helped to read at grade level, then they're more likely to graduate high school on time, right? Which is great. And so thinking about kind of what this need looks like from a current state, sort of giving it a perspective based on what I want to do, and then giving a little bit of a vision to what my community could look like if my need is addressed. I'm then going to look, then obviously there's something in the middle there that's missing, right? How do we go from having the need or problem to actually generating that community impact? And that's where our program design starts to kind of really take shape, I think, into what folks think about when they think about a program design. We're thinking about how members are going to intervene in the need. So we want to think about kind of the different elements that we're building in through our program to kind of help make this difference that we know our community needs. We're looking at kind of justifying why we think this is going to work, right? And we'll talk a little bit about what those pieces can mean. We're also looking for an evidence base. And so oftentimes when folks hear the phrase evidence base, they think of the data and statistics to prove their need, which can be true. We do want data and statistics to prove the need. But I mean, what might be different about an AmeriCorps program design than another grant request or something like that is really looking at how are you supporting your proposed program, right? Or how are you supporting your proposed activity? We oftentimes most want to know sort of why you think this is going to work, because we believe you, right? We believe you in your community need. Hopefully you've really articulated kind of your community condition in a way that makes a lot of sense to the grant reviewers. But then this is really your time to say, this is why we think this tutoring program is going to be successful, whether that's showing us other tutoring programs that are similar that have had the same impact or your own program activities. And we'll dive a little bit more into that. But these three pieces are kind of the core foundation to what we think of as your AmeriCorps program design. A well-articulated need about your community, this kind of intervention, right, to use a technical term, or your AmeriCorps program, what it's going to do, and then how what you're going to do is going to make a difference. That's sort of our chain of logic. Sometimes you'll see this referred to as a theory of change. AmeriCorps has recently kind of started moving away a little bit from theory of change as like a core requirement, but I still think it's a helpful tool to kind of think through. This is the core component of what your program design narrative is going to answer. Now, the next piece of this is crafting a logic model that goes along with your program, with your theory of change or your program narrative. So really this is a challenge or an exciting activity to kind of think through how you can balance your program narrative, right? So how you've described your need, how you've proven or justified your program intervention and the kind of vision that you're casting for your community, your logic model is really kind of all the nitty-gritty details. So we're thinking about how many members and how often they're serving and what they're doing and what you're going to measure as outcomes. This is really where you get to put it in your logic model to kind of help you save some space in your narratives, because there will be a lot when you actually get to applying for AmeriCorps. There's a whole kind of framework for what they want you to discuss, how you're going to go about kind of managing your program. And so your logic model is really your place where you have the most room and flexibility to put in a lot of these details, like how many sites you're going to have and all of that kind of stuff. So let's take a look at what this might look like. Again, we're using our sort of need program impact from the slides before, my example about kids not reading at grade level. And then I've kind of charted out a little bit of what some of those details might look like that I would put in a logic model. So kind of first thinking about my need or problem, looking at how that correlates to inputs, right? What resources are you hoping to leverage in this program? This could be how many AmeriCorps members you want to have. This could be how many site partnerships you're planning on utilizing or promoting. This could also be kind of what program components you might already have. So if let's say you already have a tutoring program, right, or an after school program at your organization, and you're looking to bring in AmeriCorps members to help double the amount of students you're able to serve. At inputs, you might put in some of the resources that you're already using for that tutoring program to kind of help show how your organization is going to support this intervention or this program. In the second column, we're looking at kind of activities, right? Or it might say what the intervention is or different things. And really what it's looking for there is kind of the specifics. How often, how many, at what frequency, different things like that. And so this is where you get really specific around 1 hour weekly classes, right? It's going to be this many total based on the weeks that the school year is in session. What the class is going to focus on. If I was filling out an AmeriCorps program logic model, I might also put specifically where my members are going to serve in that class, right? Are they leading the class? Are they assisting? Are they doing any one-on-one support? Let's say you already have an existing program. You might already have a pretty good sense of how you're planning on using your members, right? Because they're going to be teachers in your classrooms or something like that. If this is a brand new program, you might be kind of thinking, okay, well, they're going to, serve in this capacity, and they're also going to need to plan some of those activities or programs. And so this is where you're putting all of those kinds of details. And then finally, we'll talk more about kind of evaluation and thinking about measuring your AmeriCorps program in a future session. But this is where we start thinking about how are we talking about the impact of our program? Everything from kind of the next day impact, right? How many students are attending your program or your sessions, all the way through to kind of why it's going to eventually get to that vision that you casted. So kind of thinking about what that high level impact was, sort of helping somebody connect the dots from providing an enrichment class to graduating high school on time, right? Help us kind of with that path of how does one thing lead to the other. And this is really where you get to kind of start putting in numbers of how many students you think you're going to impact, how many students do you think are actually going to meet the desired outcome. It's probably not going to be 100%, right? But kind of starting to put some numbers to those ideas. We can talk more about national performance measures, but this is also where an AmeriCorps program design starts to deviate a little bit from like what you might see in another grants logic model. AmeriCorps has a whole guide of sort of how they want to see programs evaluating their activities. We can talk more about that again, but really it's just kind of saying if you're doing an education program, this is the type of outcomes that we want to see, and it's pretty general. So for education programs, for example, the main output that they want to see is number of students served. And so you're probably tracking that in some way, right? And then the corresponding outcome might be how many are showing a improvement in social and emotional learning, or how many are showing academic improvement. So the national performance measures are pretty broad and pretty easy to pick to correlate along with your program model, but just something to keep in mind that as you're thinking about outputs and outcomes, that's one place that you can kind of go to check to sort of see, am I on track? So we've covered a lot in the span of like 10 minutes, right? I've taken this all the way through from, do you want to apply for AmeriCorps State to this is what your logic model looks like, right? And so just to kind of think through the steps, right? We're thinking about first deciding that AmeriCorps State is your option. If it's not, talk to us. We would love to help you kind of think through creatively how AmeriCorps programs, whether it's AmeriCorps State or not, can help be a solution for you. Then we're thinking about kind of that need, right? Is that something that you already have super defined, that is just kind of a copy and paste, or is this something that you're really going to take a step back and think, okay, yeah, I need to figure out what my need is, right? I need to look at some data and figure out how I want to really define the need or how we're going to approach it, right? Because a need can take a lot of different forms. And then thinking about that impact, right? Of how defined is it that I already know, what I want to see as a result. And then really kind of once you have those two pieces coming around to that middle section of, what are we going to do about it? Right? How do we connect the need that we see with what we want to see for our community and what needs to be done to sort of help us get there? For some folks, this might be like, yes, I'm totally on track. I just needed this to-do list and now I'm good, right? And props, right? Love that. We would love to chat with you about kind of wherever you are in your program design process, and hope that this was helpful. I also want to say, just for folks that might be thinking, wow, you covered a whole lot, and I'm not exactly sure I know what we're doing or how I would propose this or what different pieces I want to have my AmeriCorps members do. I would kind of make a plug for next week as well. We're going to be talking about member service and how AmeriCorps members show up, can serve, could serve, do serve in communities. But I would also want to kind of take a pause here and talk about some of the different avenues for your program design journey, right? So if that logic model is not something that you have on hand already, consider a couple of these steps. The first one is a planning grant. So I don't think we have any planning grantees that I can pick on here today, but a planning grant is an opportunity that Serve Virginia offers to organizations that want to have AmeriCorps but need kind of some time, some resources, some support in actually getting to that place where they feel like they have a really well-designed AmeriCorps program. This is a 12-month opportunity where you apply for funding to help support your staff time and some other, if you need a consultant or different things like that, to basically walk you through the planning process. So we do what I covered in 10 minutes over 12 months. We kind of think through everything from what is your community need? How are you working with partners? What kind of change do you want to see in your community? All the way through down to what are your AmeriCorps members going to do and how are you going to supervise them and what are they going to how are they going to operate in this program. So if that sounds helpful, we highly recommend planning grants. We think that they're really good opportunities to kind of take a step back, and with the help and resources of Serve Virginia, we kind of help hold your hand and walk you through some of those different pieces so you're not doing this on your own. So highly recommend that process and can help connect you with some planning grantees that can share sort of about how the planning grant experience has worked out for them. I would also say if you are, let's say you're 70% there, right? Like you have your community need, you have a pretty good idea of the vision, and you're just kind of wondering, how do I actually use AmeriCorps? I would recommend going to the AmeriCorps Evidence Exchange, and I can put the link for that in the chat box kind of once I close my slides. And that is really where existing AmeriCorps programs have done evaluations of their program and then put those evaluations online for other people to read and think about how that might inspire other national service programs. So for example, if you want to plan a program that provides financial literacy education to low-income adults, right? We can look on the evidence exchange. You can look on the evidence exchange for other programs that have done similar things and seen what results they've experienced. And that can be a really great way, not saying you have to necessarily copy and paste their entire program, but to really ground your program in evidence of what else is already working and give you an idea of how your members might creatively intervene in your community need. And then also learning from others. I'll plug this a little bit on my next slide as well, but we have a great portfolio of over 15 different AmeriCorps programs already in Virginia that we would love to help connect you with. And if there's programs outside of the state that we know of, we'd love to help connect you there as well. Just because starting from scratch is really hard, right? And so we want to make sure that you have all of the tools and resources that we can think of to help you in the process as you're thinking about building this AmeriCorps program design. And then let's say that you have a really specific community need and, none of this is really quite hitting how you want to shape your program. We can talk about other sources of program design. So thinking about academic clearinghouses, research articles, other program models that are serving as best practices that we can help you sort of work through to think, can this be a really good basis for an AmeriCorps program? I'll also just kind of make a plug here. If you have an existing program and you have a couple years of data of how your program is working, you can be a great best practice for yourself, right? And so thinking about your existing program data and your existing program outputs and outcomes can be a really great foundational base, especially if you're doing something that's maybe kind of different, right? And if you are in a kind of evolving field of practice, your own program information and data could be a really great source to help inspire and or establish your program model. I'll talk a little bit more about the planning grants. Again, it's a 12-month period. The grants are usually from between $75,000 to $240,000 dollars for the grant year. There is a match requirement, and generally the majority of this funding goes towards staff time and towards like utilizing consultant services and things like that. I can answer more questions specifically. The important part here is that planning grants don't support members. So this is really just design your AmeriCorps program, and then you would apply for an operational grant following your planning grant to actually engage members at your site. For the requirements for the planning grant, you don't necessarily need to have the whole kit and caboodle, right? Because we're going to help you make that. So when we think about your planning grant application, we're thinking about, do you have a community need identified? It can be a little bit more vague than what we might expect for an operational program that's ready to hit the ground running. But we still want to get a sense of, how are you thinking about needs in your community and what act in your community in the future. And then why AmeriCorps, right? Of like, what is it about an AmeriCorps program that you think could be a good fit here? And then also thinking about there are requirements in each RFA or request for applications that might have other requirements for the planning grant. And so I would just kind of throw that out there as well, but just kind of wanting to give you sort of a comparison, right? So if you're ready to engage members and apply for operational funding, then you're thinking about that logic model and the theory of change and all those things. If you're kind of a couple steps behind that and wanting to sort of design an AmeriCorps program, the planning grant can be a really great resource, and it would be in the same application, but it would be under the planning grant criteria instead of the operational grant. Again, you're providing a summary, but you're answering some different questions. So instead of proposing or providing a program design, you're thinking of answering questions like, do you already have partnerships in this field? What is your organization already doing? And why AmeriCorps could be a solution. There are a couple of resources that I would highly recommend, whether you're looking at planning grants or operational grants. You can look at last year's RFA. So the request for applications does change from year to year, but it's always good to kind of see what last year's looked like. And I'll send this out as well with the link, so you can either use the QR code or just go directly to the website. There's a notice of funding opportunity or an AmeriCorps grant opportunity that they've already put out that we use to frame up the RFA. So I always just kind of recommend, if you're trying to get ahead of the game, it can be helpful to kind of look and see what general AmeriCorps programs are required to do, and then know that we always put some state structure around that. And their planning grants won't be in the NOFO, but they will be in the RFA. We would love to talk with you. I've mentioned a couple times we'd love to kind of chat with you one-on-one about kind of wherever you are in the process. We love talking to folks now because once the RFA is on the street, we're a little bit more restricted in what questions we can answer. And so we would love to do as much as we can to get you ready so that when the RFA drops, you're kind of all ready to go, and we've answered any questions that you might have. And then I'll also, in the follow-up materials, provide some links to current AmeriCorps Virginia programs so you can get a sense of who else is operating in the state. Whew! So I did about an hour-long presentation in 20 minutes, so I'm pretty proud of myself. I'm going to go ahead and get out of the presentation and back on my Teams. Let's stop sharing. There we go. There's always that moment where Teams has to catch up to where I am. And I would love to answer some questions. Let's see. It looks like things are waking up. So Veronica, I will definitely reach out to you. Yeah, we love hearing that folks are interested in kind of extending their experience. Do you have anything you'd want to add as an AmeriCorps alum about kind of why being an alum you would encourage folks to think about an AmeriCorps program?
Yes, absolutely. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. It was an invaluable experience. I'd worked at nonprofits before, but at the nonprofit I did service at, Embrace Richmond, I wore many, many hats. So I was a resource coordinator, a community liaison, a peer leader. I started a group for women, all about female empowerment. And I was also able to train people. I got case management experience through Homeward, who was at that time in the same building when we were on Commerce Road. There were so many people in underserved communities that we impacted, but at the same time, we had an opportunity to work with churches and other programs hand in hand. So that was invaluable. The AmeriCorps Way gave us besides the on-job training, we also had our training that we did through AmeriCorps, which
Mhm.
was huge. Um, Met a lot of great people who to this day I still cross paths and work with.
Yeah,
Some
that's
some
awesome.
former AmeriCorps members and I were now on boards together. We were commissioners together. We've just always crossed paths. The organization that I'm working at right now, there is now an AmeriCorps division of that, but that's not the division that I want to do. But it's awesome. So I
That's
don't know
great.
any other ways to say it, but you just get so much experience.
That's awesome. That is I think that's the most compelling. I mean, I really get to nerd out about AmeriCorps program design, but I think that it's all of the impact on members and on the community that actually makes it worth it, right? Of like, programs are hard and it's hard to
And
manage. And
also,
so,
I've got one more thing too.
yeah.
You get an opportunity to let people who are seniors have meaningful
Hmm.
work from
Yeah.
their life experience. You
Hmm.
also give people an opportunity who needed second chances to have work. You
Hmm.
also give an opportunity to people who are just graduating from college to get valuable experience in operations and management.
Yeah.
So
And having all
it's a
those
great
people learn from
opportunity.
each other,
Yes.
like being in the same space is just, yeah, so impactful. That's great. Well, thank you so much, Veronica. I'll definitely be in touch, but that's so great to hear about your experience. I appreciate that. Comments. We did have a planning grantee join, so if anybody has any planning grant questions, I'm happy to happy to rope her into giving her experience. Susan, I don't know if there are like 3 words that you have to describe the planning grant cycle so far that you'd want to share.
Sure. Hold on to your hat.
That's perfect.
Actually, the planning grant was pretty simple. Submitting it was pretty simple, but it can get confusing.
Hmm. Yeah. And so would you say that the planning grant has been kind of an essential step for y'all?
Yes, I would say we would be totally lost if we
Hmm.
hadn't done the planning grant. Yes. But it's been good. I mean, AmeriCorps will take you through each step once you get the planning grant. So it's just a lot, but I think it's going to be worth it in the long run. I would advocate for it.
Awesome. Thanks, Susan.